Hi everybody, let's talk about lockout tagout for the affected employees. Now we know that there are two types of lockout tagout. Some people consider three, but I like to look at two. There's the authorized employee, there's the affected employee, and some people call other employee training. Now authorized employees are obviously the employees who are authorized to go in and come in to perform service, maybe even maintenance, cleaning, preventive maintenance, whatever it might be, repair. The affected employee is typically someone who operates the piece of equipment or they work generally in the area. But so are the other employees that we talked about. They are people who work in the area as well. But today we're conducting training on lockout tagout affected employees. Now the employer authorized certain employees to bypass guards and enter into the machine's point of operation, and that's to perform some kind of task. Typically it's a repair or maintenance, preventive maintenance or cleaning, something along that line. Now the type of employees, here's authorized employees, an employee that's responsible for locking and tagging out a machine before performing that service or maintenance or whatever task they may be doing at that point. Now here's another type. We talked earlier about affected employees, and that's the training that we're doing here today. Affected employees is an employee responsible for operating the equipment. An employee who works in the area. They're not authorized to perform lockout tagout, but they are affected by the lockout tagout. Now, affected employees cannot help authorized employees service the machine or work on the machine, as we call it a lot of times. When an authorized employee places a piece of equipment under lockout tagout, the affected employees must move away from the area and move away from the piece of equipment because they're not involved. They're not allowed to be involved in lockout tagout. Affected employees must understand the importance of lockout tagout, understand the importance of the procedures, understand what they're seeing when they see a lock or a tag on a piece of equipment, and understand they must not operate or try to start that equipment or even attempt to move a lock or a tag once this has been placed on a piece of equipment. Now we talk about the lockout tagout definitions. The definition really is the process of preventing the flow of energy into the machine. Now some machines may have one set of energy, such as electrical. Other machines may have 2, 3, maybe 4. It may have hydraulic, pneumatic, may have coal, may have heat, may have water. It could be a number of things coming into the piece of equipment. But the process of preventing the flow of energy consists of installing locks, blocks, or chains or something to prevent that piece of equipment from moving while it's being maintained or repaired or whatever the authorized person is doing. It requires an authorized employee to apply and remove the locks. Remember, they're the only ones who can apply and remove locks. Affected people cannot do that. Tagout definition, sometimes there are pieces of equipment where you can't put a lock on it. So now we have a tag. And the tag, the process of placing the tag on the power source, it acts as a warning, number one. The tag must clearly indicate do not operate. And the tag, when used, the machine is used for when a machine won't accept a lock. There are some disconnects. There may even be some on and off switches or some lockout valves. There could be a number of things that you just can't get a lock on. So at that point we would shut them down, turn them off, whatever we need to do to stop the flow of energy and place one of these tags on that particular lockout or tagout piece. The tag must be applied and removed by an authorized person, and an affected person cannot remove a tag or a lock. There are many different sources of energy that comes into a piece of equipment. Some companies deal with maybe only a few. Some may deal with all of them. We have electrical, mechanical, pneumatic, hydraulic. We also have chemical, thermal, water under pressure, gravity, potential gravity or potential energy as we call it. There are only two types of energy. It's either kinetic or it's potential. Energy control program. Energy control procedures consist of a written lockout tagout program. Now the lockout tagout program will identify the different steps, the different pieces of equipment, and what the lockout procedures are for each piece of equipment, machine specific. So if you have 10 pieces of machinery, you'll need 10 lockout tagout procedures posted on the machine in writing so that at any given point someone could review those, especially the authorized people, can go in and say, okay, here's the electrical disconnect, here's the hydraulic shutoff, here's the it could be whatever, okay? So keep that in mind. Also, we're required to do employee training, which is what we're doing now. Remember, we're doing training for affected employees, not authorized employees. Then we conduct periodic inspections. At least once a year, we have to review the energy control procedures to make sure they're still current and they're still the safest way to perform maintenance on a particular piece of equipment. So I like to use the 6-step shutdown procedure. 6 steps is pretty easy to remember. So we look for the procedure for controlling energy. Number 1, I want to prepare for a shutdown. We notify the affected employees. If I'm an authorized employee, the first thing I would do is notify the affected employees that we're about to shut down this machine. We have whatever procedures we're going to use, whether it's a repair or maintenance or whatever it might be, all of that is prepared and ready to go. So then we go into the shutdown. That's when we hit the shutdown as how we would normally shut down this piece of equipment and go through those procedures. After that, we would isolate the equipment from energy. If it's only electrical, I may go over to a disconnect, turn the disconnect off. If there's hydraulic, I may go over and turn the hydraulic pump off. And then at that point, I might look at some other items to make sure there's not any water or heat or anything else that I might need to isolate from. Now, once I've isolated the equipment from the energy, then I want to apply my lock or my tag. Once I've done that, then I want to release any stored energy that's in there. If the hydraulic pump doesn't bleed itself off whenever it shuts down, should be a gauge somewhere that's reading 0 pressure, then there might be a valve or there might be something where I need to physically bleed off the pressure on one of the hydraulic lines. So make yourself familiar with your piece of equipment to make sure all of this is in place. If you don't have some type of gauge that would tell you that the pressure has been bled off, then there should be some manual way that you'll be able to check that for yourself. Now, we've released all the stored energy, and now I want to verify the isolation. Easiest way, once I've shut down the piece of equipment and I've isolated the equipment from the energy sources, I've applied my locks and my tags, I've released stored energy, now I want to verify it. So I'll go over and I hit the start button. If the machine doesn't move, then I'm comfortable that I've verified that all of the energy has been released. Now, what if I hit the start button and maybe the machine jogs or maybe tries to cycle around a little bit? There are some pieces of equipment that have large capacitors in them, and they may store up some energy and maybe just enough energy to cycle that piece of equipment. Well, you want to make sure your hands or your fingers are not in there when that thing cycles around. So that's part of verifying the isolation. Once you hit the start button and it moves, you may have just discharged the capacitor. So hit the start button again. If it moves again, then there's another source of energy coming in that you need to track down and find out where it's coming from. If it doesn't move the second time you hit the button, then you're probably ready to go at that point and proceed on with maintenance, repair, service, whatever it might be. Now, only authorized employees can attach and remove locks and tags. Devices must be durable. They must identify the person who applies them. So when I walk over to a tag and I see a lock hanging on it or the hasp right here, and I see the lock hanging on the hasp, I should be able to look at that lock and identify which maintenance person or which authorized person is actually performing maintenance on this machine. Should have their name written on it. Some companies like to take a picture and put it on the lock, the picture of the authorized person, and put it on there. Either one of those are very acceptable. Now keep in mind, as we summarize lockout tagout training for affected employees, that affected employees must understand the energy control procedures. That's what we've been talking about throughout this training video. Stay clear of the equipment while it's under lockout tagout. Remember, you're not authorized, you're affected. You have to move away, and you can't help an authorized person work on a piece of equipment. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and I hope that you perform all of these procedures safely. It is critically important that you do not leave out a step when we talked about those 6-step procedures. Do not leave out one step, because every step is critical in making this a safe operation. This work can be done safely as long as we follow all the procedures.